I'm really excited to be here with all of you. I'm actually more excited because I'm really close to all of your ages. I'm only 21, which a lot of people don't know. And a lot of times when people talk to me, they ask me, what was it that really prepared you for being there on January the 8th and helping take part in what ultimately helped save the life of Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords? And for me, it goes back to when I was 5 years old. When I was 5 years old, I had a very interesting experience that really changed how I viewed life and what I wanted to do. I was sitting at the edge of my bed, and my younger sister is jumping on top of it, and I'm not paying attention, and I fall backwards, and I end up cracking my skull. And I am bleeding profusely, and my mom says we have to go to the hospital. But being 5 years old, the only other time that I had ever heard of the hospital was when someone was dying or dead. So for me, when my mom says, you're going to the hospital and my head is bleeding, I think I'm on the verge of death. And it was a very traumatizing experience. But when I got to the hospital, it was really interesting. The very first thing that happened was there was a nurse who was already there waiting for us when we got there. And when we got there, she came up to me and she gave me a big hug and she said, you know, everything's gonna be okay. We're gonna take care of you. And the doctors and the nurses at the hospital really made a concerted effort to let me know everything's gonna be fine. But then after they cleaned me up and they put some stitches, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I wasn't gonna die. I ended up getting a chance to shadow the doctor who actually did the stitches. So I got to see what he did for a living. And I was so fascinated, and that day I decided, you know, I wanna help other people. I wanna make a difference. But because I was only 5 years old, and I had this impression of the only way that you can help people is by being a doctor, for the entirety of my life, I kept saying, you know, I'm gonna be a doctor, I'm gonna be a doctor, I'm gonna be a doctor or a nurse, because that's the only way that I thought people could help others. So I get to high school, and I was really fortunate. My high school, even though it's in the south side of Tucson, which is not the richest part of Tucson, it's actually the bad side of town, it had this great program, and it was called JTED. And what we did is we were actually trained as certified nursing assistants. So I did the training as a certified nursing assistant as a junior in high school. I really did well. I loved it. And I kept saying, you know, I'm going to be a doctor, so this is perfect. It's good. It's a good starting point. And then my senior year comes about, and there was an advanced level, which you basically did the exact same things, but now you actually took your certification exam. And my teacher asked me, you know, we were really impressed with you last year. Would you want to do the advanced program, or there's another program that we think you'd be perfect for? And I said, what is it? I'd love to take a challenge because I was always that little overachiever. And she said, it's phlebotomy. So how many of you know what phlebotomy is? Okay, so not too many. So phlebotomy is the art of being a vampire. So what you do with phlebotomy is, we're those people that go into hospital rooms and in clinics and draw blood. So I, on my own, with my teacher, learned how to be a phlebotomist. I graduate from high school and I start working in a hospital, and you know what, after 2 months of doing it right after high school, I realized, you know, I love patients, I love helping others, but this is not something that I want to keep doing. And it was right around that time that I actually met Congresswoman Giffords. Starting in 2007, when I was 17, I started volunteering for Hillary Clinton's campaign for president. And when that ended in June of 2008, I said, you know what, I'm never gonna be involved in politics again. I'm so burnt out, I'm so tired, never gonna do this again. That lasted 2 days. I ended up meeting Gabby, and when I met Gabby, it was at an event, it was kind of a town hall, and I was really struck by her. She had this great warmth and this great spirit, but she was extremely intelligent. And I was drawn to her immediately. And even though I didn't live in her district, I wanted to ask her a few questions. But I said, you know, there's no way that someone who's a member of Congress is going to wait around to listen to some 18-year-old who thinks they know everything. So I waited, and she talked to everyone. And she made this great effort to make sure she learned your name. She made eye contact, whether you were 5 or 90. And she was doing this with everyone, and I was so struck by it that I actually ended up volunteering for her campaign as an intern. So in 2008, I worked on her campaign. She won, thankfully. In 2010, we had another tough election. It was actually the hardest election she's ever had. In 2010, it was a very difficult year in politics. It was filled with a lot of hate and a lot of vitriol. There was this big wave of Republicans taking seats all over the country. But what was most striking to me was the level of maturity for some of the people who are involved in politics. Congresswoman Giffords had always talked about the importance of being able to work with others and being able to disagree while still being agreeable, like the justice mentioned. And her opponent was not a proponent of this at all. And it got really awful towards the end. The door of her congressional office was shot at. Someone showed up to a debate and dropped a gun. So it was a very tough year. But on November, the election day, there was this big party, and once it ended, and we still didn't know the results of her election. Her election was really close. We didn't know for 2 weeks what her results were, whether she had won or not. But after the parties ended and a lot of other people have lost their seats, a lot of people are upset and crying. And I don't know if you've ever worked on elections, but if you work on elections, the 4-day period before the election day is the most exhausting time of your life. So you're tired, you're cranky, you're hungry, you haven't gotten any sleep. And that's how everyone is around her. And I get invited to the private room where she is with her family and a few close friends and a few high-level staffers. And everyone else is crying because we don't know what's going to happen. We're 500 votes behind, but there's still about 10,000 votes to be counted, but it's so close she might lose. And she comes up to me and she says, you know, it doesn't matter whether I win or lose. It's not about politics. It's about making sure that we help others. So again, that faith in her as a person, not as a politician, was restored in me. I had been so tired. I had been knocking on hundreds of doors, making thousands of phone calls for her. So I, again, had a renewed sense of faith in her, and I signed up to work in her congressional office. It was actually supposed to start on January the 12th, but I actually got a phone call on the day before New Year's by her office manager, and she said, you know, we know you live in Tucson. Would you be willing to start early because most of our other interns are from out of state and won't come in until the 12th? And I said, sure. So I started on January the 3rd. About 2 days after I started my internship, I get a phone call saying, so she's coming into town, and she's coming in on Saturday. Would you be willing to help with an event? I said, sure. So this is what happened on January the 8th. I was working as an intern. I was signing people in, trying to make sure that we were controlling the line of people that wanted to talk to her, because everyone was getting a chance to talk to her one-on-one. And when I was signing people in, about 10 minutes into the event, shots were fired. I was standing at the back of the line. I was about 40 feet away from where the Congresswoman was. And I dropped what I was doing and I ran towards where the Congresswoman would be. Because I knew that at that moment, the most important thing was to try and get to the people who had been injured first. And I had limited training. I had the training as a certified nursing assistant and as a phlebotomist. So I said, you know, I'm going to do what I can right now to try and help those who are injured. So I get to the front of the line, and when I get there, I see that there's multiple people who had been injured. There was 19 people who were shot, 6 people who passed away. But when I get to the front, I start doing triage, and I start trying to figure out who can we still save. So I check for pulses, I check for respirations. And then I look to my left, and Congresswoman Giffords is kind of slumped over, and for a second there I thought maybe she was in a defensive position, and I was really hopeful that it was a defensive position. But I get to her, and she's not in a defensive position. She'd been injured. So I have to prop her up against my chest to clear her airway to make sure she can breathe, because she had started breathing in some of her own blood. And then I start using my bare hand to apply pressure to her wound. And I was in that position for about 15 minutes, and there was all of this chaos going on around me. But one of the most striking things about January the 8th was people who had never had any training would come up and say, I've never done anything in medicine. What can I do to help? And we saw people coming together who had never thought that they would one day be involved in a tragedy like this, stepping up. And I think those are the things that I will remember most. People coming together and working to try and save others. So people ask me, what have you learned from January the 8th? And you know, I've learned three or four things that I think I knew from a long time ago, but it doesn't really click. It doesn't really have that aha moment until something tragic happens. And I think the first one is the importance of kindness. So I think a lot of times we say that kindness is a random act, that it's something that just happens. But kindness is not just something that happens. It's something that we need to think about. It's something that we need to work towards. It's something that you need to do consciously. And whether it's being kinder to your classmates, to your parents, your family, it's something that we actually need to do. And the more of us that act kindly towards each other, the better that we'll all be. The second lesson is education is never wasted. There's no such thing as learning things that you don't need. Because I never would have thought that the training that I had received in high school as a certified nursing assistant and as a phlebotomist, when I got into politics, would ever be used again. So everything that you learn, everything that you know is a big part of whatever your moment will be. My moment was helping take part in this tragedy. But it was a lifetime of experiences that really got me there. It wasn't just one thing. It was all of these things that prepared me. So when you're going out there, you know, it's not always fun to do that homework assignment, but you never know when you might use it again. You never know what you're learning that day might come back in 10 years and be something that you need. And the last lesson is the importance of public service. So right after January the 8th, I said, I'm not a hero, and I still believe that. But I think that the people that are the real heroes are the people that are the public servants. Those are the people who have given up their lives to try and help others. And it's a lifetime commitment because we see people that are teachers, we see people that are doctors, we see people that are judges, that they have said, we want to help society be a better place. And those are the real heroes. So, you know, it's great to look up to people in sports and in movies and music, but I think the people that are the real heroes are the people who have dedicated of themselves to try and make this a better place. So I encourage you all to go and make the world a better place. If you want to go into public service, there's no one way to be in public service. Public service is something that you define for yourself. You could be a doctor or a nurse. You could be a philanthropist. You could be whatever you want. But just make sure that once you succeed, you come back and you give back. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the TED Talks.